We are in the masterclass on mental health, so you are in the right place. We will do this series in the future about topics that we believe are going to be helpful for people. And right now, because of some of the transition that's going on in the United States federal government, we are talking about current and federal employees as well as the military. Information that we're sharing is not medical advice. It's here to spark conversation with you, your providers, and your support system. So please just consider that. Agenda for today. For the 3 sessions that we're doing, we're talking about empowerment, understanding stress and trauma, and creating life change. So the first portion, which we talked about last week, was the empowerment. So today we're talking about understanding stress and trauma. We're going to have a beginning. What is trauma? The body remembers. What is emotional abuse? What is institutional abuse? Psychological symptoms, regaining control, and homework, and then our closing. And I might switch the homework and closing up. And then next week will be creating life change. It'll be the last part of our series. So I am Dr. Virginia with Led Life Psychiatry. I am in the board, I'm board certified in the realm of psychiatry, board certified by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. I am an interventional psychiatrist, which means I actually use procedures to help people. So yes, we can use therapy and medications. But sometimes that doesn't work for folks with difficult to treat depression, for example, or difficult to treat OCD, or folks with PTSD or TBI, or folks on the autism spectrum have benefited from some of the procedures, including Spravato, which is an intranasal medicine, ketamine, or transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. I am certified as a trauma specialist in the form of being a trauma-informed provider. I'm also a STAR behavioral health provider with TRICARE and the VA through the Center for Deployment and Psychology. I do my continuing medical education credits there. And more receipts. I am an Army brat. My dad was Army. Every branch of the government has been covered. If you look at my cousins and uncles, as well, both sides, paternal and maternal. And I'm the daughter of a civilian federal worker, worked in the civilian government for the Navy for over 44 years before she retired. Bonus is going to be an episode that we'll be sharing of my interview of her and talking about what she did in the federal government, how she made it, how she survived things like rifts and furloughs, and how it's quite different from what we're experiencing right now. So the beginning, and this is where you get to have some participation. You can certainly unmute and share, but you don't have to. And again, if you're following not during the live, but if you're following afterwards, the beginning and the closing are places where I want you to think about 3 good things. So the beginning is 3 good things that have happened thus far. I'm going to share with you 3 good things, and then I'm going to give you about a minute to think about your own 3 good things. So, first, I had breakfast with a friend this morning, with a very good friend. This morning, we had, I would call it brunch, because it was more than just regular breakfast. It was a no tears drop off at school. I have a little one, and there are some days where it can be a tearful time dropping off until we talk about the reunion and the fact that grown-ups come back. And I got to see a potential property for our next location for some of the work that we're going to be doing to support the community. So those are my 3 good things. So I want you to think about 3 good things or 3 positive things that are going on in your life right now. So I'll give you about a minute to do that. All right. Well, thanks for thinking of those 3 things. And I did see a response in the chat, and Those are indeed three good things. Why don't you put your three things in the comment if you're joining us and following outside of the live, but on a different platform? So we're going to start out by talking about what is trauma. And I think in this day and age, most people have an idea of what trauma is. And I'm actually going to talk more about the range. Okay. So we all experience trauma. Every single person on the planet has experienced trauma. Anyone who's over the age of 20 experienced trauma during 9/11 with the falling of the Twin Towers. And that was very difficult. I would say over 25. And that was incredibly different and difficult. And the entire nation experienced the trauma of that. Now, there's also that would be obviously severe trauma, but there's also micro trauma. You're walking and you stub your toe. That's a micro trauma to your toe. You get a paper cut. That's a micro trauma. There are still trauma. They're still traumatic. Your body is designed to be able to hold up to and withstand different types of stressors, and trauma. And most of us, I would say, would experience some forms of micro trauma. But you can range from the micro trauma, the ordinary traumas and things that we deal with throughout the day, the normal stressors, getting caught in traffic, having a minor car accident, all the way up to severe trauma. And a severe traumatic event, when we think about it from a medical term, is something that could alter your life or the life of a loved one, or you're witnessing something that could alter your life or the life of a loved one. And usually it is something that is considered life-threatening if it's a severe or major trauma. And this can vary from something that's very mildly impactful for one person, again, the paper cut, or witnessing the slowing of traffic due to a car accident. It's not directly impacting you, it's mildly impacting you. All right, there might be some irritation or frustration of being caught in traffic, whereas the person that's actually in the accident is having more severe trauma, and it's being much more impactful for them. And that can lead to what we've all probably heard of as post-traumatic stress disorder. So after the trauma, you've developed a disorder. So there are things that can impact the recovery or healing process from a disorder. First of all, the type and severity of trauma. That's something that can be a huge impactor. The length of exposure to trauma, the time where a person might be, again, thinking about 911, the folks were exposed to that through the media and other places for a long time after that. For a person that's dealt with abuse or harassment, that can go anywhere from days to weeks to sometimes years. People have experienced that. The person's personality type. I've known of people that are incredibly happy-go-lucky people, very bright, very sanguine folks, always bright, always happy. They may experience a trauma, and it doesn't seem like it phases them that much. It does phase them, of course, but they seem like they're able to bounce back a little faster, right? They have more of an optimistic mindset. Environment of origin. If you grew up in a family where it was incredibly toxic, where you had a lot of difficulties, that can be very traumatic for you in that living environment, but also beyond that. It may be more difficult for you to bounce back, or you might have develop more resilience because you grew up in a somewhat harsher environment. Current living circumstances. If you're in a living circumstance that is very safe and calming and open, and you've got the opportunity to heal, that obviously is going to be a better environment than one where there's lots of shaming and blaming and gaslighting. Of course, your general health. For folks that have come to us and wanted to have care in our clinic, if they're already dealing with a lot of other things, those things can make it more or less difficult. We've had patients that they're not able to start trauma therapy, or they're not able to start certain medications right away because it's going to impact their regular home life or interact or interfere with some of their other medical appointments, upcoming surgeries, or a move. Those things can all add stress, and those might be reasons to delay dealing with a trauma. The body remembers what the mind forgets. That was actually a famous book that people started talking about years and years ago, about 3 decades ago. And it is true. The body does remember what the mind might forget. And I want you to meet Captain Bobby Nash. Captain Bobby Nash is a captain of the 118 Firehouse in Los Angeles, California. And he is a fictional character, but he is one of the main characters that we see and talk about on 911. So if anybody's ever watched 911, you would have seen him as a firefighter. And there's a really cool story of Bobby Nash where he actually has an interaction with his mother, his estranged mother. And what ends up happening is he tells his wife, played by Angela Bassett, I get a crick in my neck every time I'm near her or we're arguing. I get a crick in my neck and it's there for a very long time because I'm already anticipating that it's going to be a negative interaction. And I want you to think, do do you have something similar in your life? Do you have this for yourself as well? There are definitely times where when we've had certain feelings and emotions, and we're going to cover those in a little bit, but we normally talk about the feelings of them, but yes, we also can have some of these physical things that we can see, and the symptoms can align very closely with complex PTSD and some other things that we would consider either co-occurring illnesses or disorders like anxiety, or just comorbid symptoms like or disorders like ADHD, for example. I want you to be thinking about where you're feeling these sensations. We're going to start with the tension, for example. Many people feel it with the neck. And I've had people say they have neck pain or headache, sometimes back pain. Folks will feel a tension or a tightness in their chest, stomach upset. But what about other sensations that you feel in your body? I've had some people just say they feel restless and nervous, or they actually recognize that it's anxiety. And then other times people will say they have a tendency to dissociate or separate themselves. They might feel numb or cold or even feel flushed. And then there's also an irritation or anger that some people will tell me that they also feel in their body, especially when thinking about the current circumstances that are going on in our lives, in our country. Notice that I put these on the screen as different colors. And for those who are listening and not just seeing, I want you to just imagine the colors that might go along with certain emotions. For example, feeling numb or cold, feeling isolated or disassociated, that might look blue, right? We associate cold with blue sometimes. How about the irritation or anxiety? Those are those red hot emotions. You press my button and I go from 0 to 60. That might be a red emotion, a flaming, fiery emotion. Nervousness or anxiety. That could be similar to red, but I've had some people depict this almost as an orangey feeling, an orange color. This nervousness, this restlessness, lots of energy. And energy, when you're looking on an MRI or PET scan, you often see energy in a variety of colors, but sometimes you'll see them in like a muted yellowish orange. When we've experienced these emotions, usually it's connected to a trauma, and trauma is the umbrella. Underneath the umbrella of trauma, you can have different types of things. A trauma can be an injury, it can be an assault, it can be abuse. Abuse is an example of a type of trauma. It's under the heading of trauma. And we're going to talk, because we're talking about federal workers and employees and the military and the culture that's within these government entities. Those are institutions, right? They're organizations, they're departments. We're going to talk about institutional abuse. What is institutional abuse? Well, basically, an institution or organization are designed to help, designed to support, right? So, Department of Defense, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, um, Social Security Administration. They're all designed to support or aid in whatever they do. Department of Defense is to support our military and agencies that are helpful for both the defense within the country, but also the defense of our allies in the rest of the world. So TSA, those kinds of administrations are all connected to that. And they're all designed to help. But what happens when they cause harm? What happens when these organizations set up a hostile work environment? How do we deal with that? What if sexual harassment occurs in the context of trying to get help? What if there's retaliation? Every agency is set up so that you have a place, an office that you can go to and report if your rights have been violated. But what if you report under the guise of safety and anonymity, but then you get retaliation on the back end. How do these organizations undermine self-esteem or even undermine what your body is naturally designed to be able to do? And I'll give you a perfect example in working with military. They actually changed the PTSD criteria because so many people in the military said that they did not have a feeling of anxiety, fear, or shame during a traumatic incident. And so that meant that they were automatically ruled out of the first iterations of PTSD because we said, you had fear that your life was being threatened. But you're trained in the military to not have some of those things. So we undermine the body's natural response for certain things for for our training, for the I'm using air quotes here for the greater good. But whose good is it? Whose good is it for if we're training our military to not feel certain emotions or have certain things when we're in the act of basically defending ourselves, defending our unit, defending our department, defending our corps. But then afterwards, our body starts having these strong emotions, having these strong reactions, when something happens that we don't necessarily intend, right? There's an accident or, we look back later on and we see, oh gosh, there were these drones attacks or there was a physical attack and, there was lives lost. And sometimes those lives are civilians and sometimes it's a child. How do you deal with that? That can undermine our sense of self safety, our sense of self, our ability to trust. And when we're denied access to supporters, right, we're seeing a lot of things right now in the US where people are protesting. I think tomorrow, this weekend is a day of major protests. And what if you're being denied the access to the right to protest or the right to have other people support you? Those are things that can actually cause harm. And usually it's causing psychological and emotional harm. And there are quite a few symptoms. We've already talked about some of the strong feelings and emotions that you can feel within your body, but I want to break those down even further. There's usually an immediate response, and then there's often a follow-up response that we often look at as a coping symptom. Okay, there's a difference between coping symptoms and coping skills. Skills are things that we've learned or adopted. A symptom is usually just something that we've just acquired on our own. Okay. Now, an immediate response when there's a threat is often fear or maybe anxiety. Maybe there's an unknown. There could be also sadness or a sense of depression or despair, confusion, disassociation. Unfortunately, that term covers a whole rubric of things. But again, let's go back to those feelings of numbness or isolation or not feeling at all. Also, feeling flushed or hyper responsive. Those can be immediate responses that we have to an immediate incident. Let's think about folks that were relieved from duty or were fired. Those folks might have felt the fear and anxiety of being fired. And then later, they might have felt sadness or confusion. Now, the more long-term things are the coping symptoms that we sometimes have. We might bottle up some of these emotions up here, and then later it becomes this anger and rage, which is why I think anger modification, or most anger classes are not as helpful as they could be, because usually they're treating the symptom. They're not going deep down into, well, why do you have this anger and rage? When's the first time you felt this? Where is it coming from? The difficulty sleeping. If you've had something happen and then you're having bad dreams about it, I've got a lot of people that don't want to go to sleep because they don't want to replay it in their mind. That self-esteem, being told that you're not good enough, smart enough, intelligent enough for your job, even though you've trained in it, you've worked in it, you've got degrees in it, being told that, you're DEI, uh, and you're possibly more qualified than the person that's telling you that. That can make you have some low self-esteem. Can make you feel as if you're not worthy. That can leave you to distrust yourself and have some mistrust or distrust of other people. Those things can all happen and can be all very difficult to deal with. You can have ongoing hypervigilance. You can have ongoing um, symptoms that you've developed again, compulsions and addictive behavior. All of those things, absolutely, all of those things can happen. So, how do you regain control? Go from a place of being in the midst of an abusive relationship or an abusive environment to having more control. So, we're going to talk about some things. And first, I like these next three slides are all about regaining control. And the first thing I want you to think about is how do you feel like you deserve to be treated? Be thinking through what does my experience, my humanity, my gender, what do those things afford me in the society in which I lived? And in the United States, we are very, very different than most other countries. And sometimes we think that can be a good thing, but I was just watching a wonderful documentary about race. Those conversations don't exist outside of the United States. A lot of what we think of as race are constructs that came out of slavery, right? If you were a quote unquote certain race, it was actually a good thing because then you could keep a certain group kind of separated from another group, right? And then if you were a certain race, then you automatically became the property or eligible to become the property of another person, right? And so those constructs are man-made constructs that were created for political power and political control. But how do you feel that you deserve to be treated? Do you fall under this hierarchy of race? Is that where the treatment should be? Are there other things that should come into that construct of what you deserve, right? What does our Constitution say? Our Constitution say that you deserve to have the ability to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, and things that help you have abundant life, have full freedom, financial freedom, geographic freedom to live where you want, be where you want, time freedom, monetary freedom. All of these freedoms are things that are part of our Constitution. Do you really believe that you deserve to have the treatment that's afforded by our U.S. Constitution? So we're talking about U.S. federal workers, so that's where we're keeping this here to the United States. And then how do you respond to being judged, criticized, blamed, or shamed? Right? Was the treatment that you have, was that flavored and tailored? I'm looking at the chat. Was that flavored or tailored by how you were raised? Right? Do you deserve to be treated with empathy and kindness? Okay. And when you're being judged, do you judge others as you've been judged, or do you display that the golden rule? Okay. So when we think about also gaining control, recognize that you do have these, as the Constitution says, inalienable rights. You have rights to privacy. You have rights to say no. You have rights to express your feelings and the right to refuse to do unethical things or things that conflict with your values and your standards. These are all things that you have by right. If you own a property, there are certain things that you can and cannot do on your property. And there's something called by rights. If I want to take my home in a certain area, a certain neighborhood, there are certain things that I can turn my home into, and I don't need any additional permissions from anyone else because it's my right to do it. Now, there are certain things I may have to go get zoning and special permits and ask my neighbor's permission, but there are certain things that I can just do. Okay. And I want you to think about that when you're thinking about working in the different organizations and institutions that we have. You have these rights within your institution. We just don't always know about it. And I want you to be thinking about this phrase. Please feel free to take a screenshot. I am just as valuable and capable as any person that I come into contact with. Okay? Just as valuable. By the fact that you are human, you have certain human rights. And it's understood that you have certain capabilities and that you're capable of doing the same amount of work that another person can do. You may need additional accommodations, but you still have the same capabilities within your area of expertise. And you are a SME or a subject matter expert on whatever it is that you have expertise in. And you have the right to be able to talk about that and stand up for that. So when we feel like our rights are being infringed on or being taken advantage of, that is when we start experiencing those micro traumas. You might have heard of something called microaggressions. That's when we experience those micro traumas or microaggressions that can be very difficult for us. Now, here's where I'm going to give you your homework and then we're going to do our close. Remember, I said I might go back and forth here as we end, but your homework is to develop a bill of rights for yourself. I have the right to, and you can certainly go to, our Bill of Rights that we have for the U.S. Constitution, from the U.S. Constitution, and determine what your rights are. But I think every person should have those rights. Within your job, you have certain rights and responsibilities as well. And then also within your home. And for your body, you have certain rights. On your physical person in your first personal body, you have certain rights. I want you to start thinking about those and come up with a bill of rights. And then the twofer for the homework is an action plan for how you're going to incorporate those bill of rights. So, for example, you have the right to say no, and your no just be no. I've had people say, I want to be able to say no in a gracious way, or I want to be able to say no and have the other person understand why I'm saying no. That's a nicety. That is a kindness, but you have the right to just say no, and that's it. Oh, would you like to go out to dinner? No, thank you. No, but thank you for asking. That's still a nicety right there, but no. And you can just say no, and that's it. And your no is just no. That is your right. I think we overcomplicate sometimes these things, um, because a no can just be a no, and it's your right to just say no. Think of your rights, and then think of your action plan for how you're going to take action to regain control in your life. For some people, they've been stripped of their rights. They have had those rights violated. And know that, particularly if it's an institution, you still have the right to file grievances. Yes, certain things have changed where certain departments have been reorganized. So it might take a little bit longer to figure out who you need to file it with and who's still in operation at this time to file certain grievances. But you still have those rights. And if you need to take legal action or have government uh, involved in your legal action, that is still your right to do. I've had many people say, oh, I'm not going to bother. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm just going to go someplace else and do something else. Guess what? That's your right. But you also have the right to take legal action in whatever form that may take. And that is your right to do that. Okay. And a lot of times we do feel badly for things like saying no. We do feel badly for exercising our rights. We sometimes will deal with that. Like I said, how do you respond to feeling judged, criticized, blamed, or shamed? Think about that as you're writing your Bill of Rights. And one way to deal with that is to remind yourself that I have the right to XYZ, and other entities are making me feel shame, right? Or judged or criticizing me for this right. I may need to just reiterate to them, this is my right. And I need you to understand that this is my right. Closing, three things to look forward to. I want you to think about three things that you have coming up that you can look forward to. So, three things to look forward to. It could be something really small, like I'm going to enjoy my lunch. I'm going to really enjoy eating this roast chicken and greens. I'm going to enjoy going and playing and doing something fun with my kids. And it can also be something bigger, like when we build out the center that we're going to be building to help folks who have special needs and who have neurodiverse backgrounds. It's going to be phenomenal. And I can't wait to see it go from where it is right now to what it's going to be. So see how I did two things that are more immediate and one thing that's a little bit further. So just remember, we do this at the end of each of our sessions. Develop some strategies that use coping skills, which are skills. Skills are things that you learn, right? You've learned something. So learning something like box breathing, where you're taking a deep breath, holding it for a certain count, relax it, releasing for a certain count, then relaxing for a certain count. So deep breath in, hold, deep breath out, hold, deep breath in. That's an example. Learning box breathing. Embracing the five senses. I love the grounding exercise where you're looking at, you're noticing, being present in the moment. Five things I see, four things that I feel, three things that I hear, two things that I smell, one thing that I taste. Be in touch with your thoughts and feelings. Looking at feelings wheels, because if you're like, I have a feeling, an emotion, I can't quite put my hands on it, there's a wheel for that. There's an app for that. There really is. Find something where you can look and see these feeling wheels. If you're feeling any of these things, eating or sleeping too much or too little, having low energy, feeling unusually confused, on edge, or scared, problems with focus or feeling off, sadness or dreading daily tasks, any of those things, if you're feeling that or experiencing that, you can reach out for help because it could be a sign of a concern like depression or anxiety disorder. Don't hesitate to seek professional help. 988 is the lifeline. It's the national lifeline for mental health crises or mental health concerns or just wanting to talk to somebody. You don't dial 911 anymore. You dial 988. You can also text if you don't feel comfortable calling or you feel like it might be a recorded line that you're working with. Text using your personal device when you're able to. Text the word home to 741 741. And of course, we thank you for joining our second part of this masterclass. You can always send a message to support@ledlifellc.com if you have any questions. The transcript and the report, this session is going to be posted on to YouTube. You can also message us if you want to learn how to be a patient in our practice at Led Life Psychiatry. We'd love to see how we can help you. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. We greatly appreciate having you in the room.